Hey, and welcome to the 8th episode of the People's Empowerment Podcast, a podcast dedicated to empowering the people, run by Empower the People, and we're here to empower the people. And today I'm joined by Daveeden, who is actually a trustee. He's been involved since the beginning, and he is an instrumental part of Empower the People, and I'm truly honored to have him on the show. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be getting into. We're going to get into a bit about Dave's life, how he got to where he is now, and also this really interesting program, a good opportunity for people to get involved with. So looking forward to getting into all of that. Hi, Dave, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, how are you, folks? Yeah, right, wanted to do a quick intro. So fundamentally, 30 years with the police. From week one, I started taking very detailed notes and collecting evidence of racism, sexism, homophobia, misogyny, unfortunately, corruption, and a few other things. And I kept those files locked away with solicitors. I updated them every week. I challenged stuff throughout my career. Never got listened to, got marginalised at everything. And then I exposed it all. I wrote a book about it, brought it out there. A few
What's that
television.
book called?
It's called Nut and Gut.
Nothing but okay.
Yeah, that's by David C. Eden. It's out on Amazon. I don't try and publicise it or push it, anything. You know, people will buy it or not. But everything that's in the Casey report is in there, giving a lot of evidence. It's been going on for 40 plus years. So since then, I've sort of been doing quite a lot of training, things like lawful observers, getting people up to speed with the law, what the police can and can't do. More importantly, what they can't do. It's very, very important for people to understand their legal rights. We see a lot of things out there where people actually inadvertently surrender their power. And unfortunately, sometimes that's due to a lack of good advice, or actually it's directly due to people being given bad advice. So there's a sort of a whole training module around that. There's some upskilling modules, 17 upskilling modules that have just been written, which are looking specifically at certain industries outside of official law enforcement. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. Tonight we're talking about stop and search. Stop and search affects everybody. It's one of the most misused powers that the police have got. And stop and search is somewhere whereby people are actually being assaulted. They're being unlawfully detained, unlawfully searched, unlawfully handcuffed. It affects certain areas of the community more than others. And it also works in so much as that now what they've got is they've got a thing called Section 60, which is no ground stop and search, where they can just stop and search you. And they've been jacking this up over the last couple of years. And again, it's gone unopposed. People are just letting this happen. And it's empowered the powers that be even further. And without these things being challenged, without policemen being taken to court, without policemen facing criminal prosecutions, we've now got used to this. They're bringing it in. They're making the youth used to it. And because, again, we've had no major backlash against it, we've now seen it integrated into the Public Order Act. So we're now getting very used to being stopped and searched without any suspicion of anything whatsoever. It's a huge problem. The government know it's a huge problem. It's been a problem for 40 years. They're not doing anything about it. Some of them are making sort of noises about being concerned about it when actually they're not. They've been given opportunities to address it. I've spoke to a number of MPs about it, and they're all, yes, we've got to do something about this. This is awful. This is wrong. Some of the MPs from the BAME community are allegedly very deeply concerned about it when you show them the figures, and then when you ask them to do anything about it, they're not willing to do anything about it. So I'll give you a couple of facts and figures about stop and search. It really is a huge problem. It's something that we're just laying down and taking, and every day innocent citizens are being stopped, searched without any powers whatsoever by the police. They're being handcuffed to the rear. they're being arrested unlawfully. And this is all part of their gathering their photographic and fingerprint and DNA databases as well. So in effect, in terms of, we'll talk about stop and search in terms of Section 60 first. Now, this is for knives and weapons, and the only reason officers can use this power of search is to search for knives and weapons. We've seen a dramatic increase in that from 622 cases back in 2017 up to where we are now. Last year's figures were 18,081 Section 60 searches, of which only 255 resulted in an arrest or a fine of any sort. So what we've got there is we've got power. Police are using it heavily. They're using it specifically targeted to certain communities, mainly the BAME communities, but we've got a success rate of 1.41% on that. So we're looking at, what's that, 98.6% on negative searches. So this is pretty, it's pretty worrying, really. So the HMIC FRS, which is Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services, says they've made a statement. Basically, what they've said, that the enforcement efforts are not being effectively focused on force priorities, and that these factors alone should be sufficient grounds to challenge the legitimacy of the power in its entirety. Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, he scrapped a voluntary system called Better Use of Stop and Search, and encouraged all chief constables to increase the use of stop and search, and quite disingenuously describing it as stop and search with love. There's an enormous amount of disparity in stop and search. The national census will tell us that the 87% of the country are white British, 3% are black British, and 10% are of visible ethnic minorities from Asian groups. The figures in terms of how stop and search is used is quite alarming. If you're a black youth aged between sort of 14, 15 and 25, you're 14 times more likely to be stopped and searched. For every 7.6 white males, we've got nearly 200 young males from the BAME communities being stopped and searched. And this is primarily for cannabis. That's the main thing that they're searching for. The detection rate is less than 20%, but the disparity in the ethnicity of people being stopped and searched is just completely out of control. Believe it or not, if you're in Dorset, you're 25 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you're from an visible ethnic minority background. So it's causing a lot of problems. It's causing problems in society. They're targeting the lower socioeconomic groups. They're targeting visible ethnic minorities. So if we think about that, let's just say the black community, for instance, 3% of the UK, they're getting stopped. Well, as I said, for every, I think 7.6 white males, there's just under 200 from the other groups. So a lot of these people are getting stopped multiple times a week, and they're being stopped illegally because the police are not following any of the protocols that surround stop and search. They're not following the law. They are pushing the boundaries of stop and search, where they're actually finding reasons to arrest people under Section 25 at pace. And as I said before, unfortunately, people are not educated. They've not had the opportunity to learn what this is. They've not had the opportunity to learn how powerful Section 25 of pace is. And so for anyone that doesn't know, offences used to have an assigned, power of arrest. So I'll give you, for instance, a criminal damage below a certain amount of value was something that there was no power of arrest for. And then it went over a threshold of a certain value, it had a power of arrest attached to it. And all offences were like that. Well, the government scrapped that, and they said, well, there are going to be no offences that carry a statutory power of arrest. And so effectively making no offence arrestable. But then they introduced a little thing called Section 25 Code G of PACE, which was necessity criteria. And there are so many necessities. The most common ones are name and address not known or suitable for the service of a summons, for the prompt and effective investigation, so on and so forth. So what they effectively did was make everything arrestable. And the police will use this power, and they will use it liberally.
Yeah, and you mentioned about trying to get the police back in check. And this is something that's really awesome about your story, is how you've had quite a few successes in taking the police down, so to speak. They put it in that kind of way. You've actually how many was it? How many police officers?
Well, I mean, at the last count, some of the stuff that I'd released into the mainstream media had resulted in more than 30, 35 officers being put on restricted duties, some being actually suspended, and some now facing criminal prosecution.
See, that's huge. Could you just expand for a minute the case about police facing criminal prosecution? Because that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that is something to do. And the problem is I can't expand on it too much because of sub judice. And so because these cases are still going through, if I start putting evidence and information into the public domain, it could be then claimed that I'm actually prejudicing them getting a fair trial, so on and so forth. And I don't want to start letting people off the hook.
What can you tell us, Dave?
By being too out there. Well, in terms of one of the things that I did was the WhatsApp group. I joined and monitored a WhatsApp group which was full of police personnel and retired police officers and so on and so forth. And over the period of number of years, I collected more than 3,000 videos and memes, all of which were racist, sexist, homophobic. Of that sort of nature. That's something that was exposed. I was then interviewed on Newsnight about that, and I showed them some of the most appalling content that you've ever seen in your life. The commissioner actually appeared on the programme, but he wouldn't appear face to face with me in the studio. They Scotland Yard wanted to see what I was going to say first, and they certainly didn't want me springing it onto them. There's another thing that I exposed, which was about firearms officers and what was happening in the joined firearms groups of Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire, specifically at one airport, and the way that certain firearms officers were harassing female aircrew. I mean, I don't know whether you can broadcast this, but they would hang around an area where the aircrew came out of. It was commonly known as the snatch patch. And then some of the officers, one in particularly, sexually harassed 3 of them. Yeah, so that made national press, and there's been some suspensions and removal from the unit and some investigations going on and so on and so forth. So that's the sort of thing. But, the thing that I'm mainly focused on is holding people accountable up to the point of prosecution. And this is what we're not doing.
Yeah, because that's huge, right? If you can, because often the police sort of hide behind the police force itself, right? So that they use that as the shield. But then if you can actually go for them individually, it would then send a message, set a precedent, get them thinking, oh, maybe I should, be a bit more careful how I act, right?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, people talk to me and they talk to me on a grand scale about things, what they're going to do, and they're going to target people at the top, and they're going to blah, blah, blah. And that's great. If you think you can do that, then do that, try it. I'd never discourage anybody. But the actually way to bring something down, in my experience, is start taking the bricks out at the bottom of the wall. Because you start taking those bricks out and the rest falls. Now, when I was in the police, there was no secret that we could hide behind the uniform, we could hide behind the organisation, and I saw that time and time and time and time again. People acting unlawfully, actually sometimes out and out criminally, and they would be protected by the organisation because there was nobody holding anybody individually accountable. What we need to understand is that police officers have a duty to do something. They have to perform everything that they do legally. Every act that they do has to be lawful. And if it isn't, then if it's outside of their remit, then they are equally as vulnerable as you or I or anyone else that would be doing that in a public domain or doing that against another person. And what we have with stop and search is that people have been stopped. They've been basically detained. They've been detained unlawfully, but they don't realise they're being detained unlawfully. They're being searched unlawfully. And very often they're actually being handcuffed to the rear completely unlawfully. Now, if you or I decided to do that to somebody, start putting handcuffs on them behind the back and going through the pockets with no powers, we'd be guilty of an assault. And that's exactly what police officers are. They're guilty of assaults. They're not conducting stop and searches properly at all. A lot of them aren't switching on their body cameras. But every time that they do that, they are acting unlawfully. So if it's an unlawful stop and search, if they've used physical force, it's an assault. Holding them individually accountable is the best way to go. People think about, we talk in terms of private prosecutions. There's actually really no such thing as a private prosecution. The minute that evidence is brought before the court and they decided to issue summons against the offenders, it basically becomes the Crown versus, it's not daveeden versus, it's not Frank Smith versus, it's the Crown versus that person. Once we start doing that and we start doing it properly, once we start raising the profile of the areas that this is happening in, as I said, it's, the lower socio-economic areas, the areas that are mostly populated by visible ethnic minorities. Now, I know a pub in the city that I could go down to tonight. My friend worked in the city for many, many years. And I could wander in there wearing my very nice city suit and buy as much Class A as I wanted. But, I'm not going to get stopped on the way out because we're not searching those type of people. We're not searching the wealthy. We're not searching the businessmen. We're not searching people that are coming out of the Groucho Club and things like that. They've got some, I think what they refer to it in the trade as showbiz sherbet. We're not searching those people. What we're searching is young men from specific ethnic minority groups for small amounts of marijuana.
Yeah, but you mentioned something just there which is interesting, and maybe we can tie this into, because you're working on a project which is kind of like building our own police force, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and you mentioned like how if we were to just randomly go and arrest someone if we didn't have the powers, but what if we were to go through what you're suggesting and sort of make our own kind of police? I mean, how does that all tie into all of this? 'Cause that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I say starting a police force, it's not exactly that. We have powers as citizens. The police have slightly more powers, but we've still got powers of detention. There are certain conditions that apply to it. But knowing the law and how the law is exercised, you can operate in that sense. Now, the security industry at the moment, there was a thing the other day I was reading from the chairman of the co-op and said, well, what's the point anymore? We might as well just open our doors and tell people to take everything. We're losing hundreds of thousands every single week through shoplifters because the police won't come out and deal with shoplifters. It's under £200. They don't want to know. They're not coming out of burglaries. They're not coming out of bike thefts or even doing anything or investigating them. So in terms of the private security industry, the SIA and licensed people to do that, that is taking over more and more and more. The losses of nearly in the last 12 months have actually doubled to nearly £1 trillion per annum. They're getting a lot of shrinkage within companies. Shrinkage is where the staff are stealing things as well. And there's nobody to investigate that. So traditionally where we've seen normal, what you might think is security guard or stood outside a door, watching for shoplifters coming in and out. They're employing more covert teams of security guards, actual training them up to investigatory level, really upskilling them there. And these people are now starting to take on the role of police. And it's a very strange line. There's a line in the sand, but that line is very, very blurred at the moment. We're seeing these sort of people establishing companies and groups that are going out into the community and doing this. I mean, near where I live in Hadley Wood, I don't live in Hadley Wood, I'd hasten to say, but I don't live far from it. It's a very, very, very wealthy area, and they have, for want of a better word, a private police force policing their area with a number of patrol vehicles, dog vans, so on and so forth. And they're taking over that community aspect of policing. Now, as we all know, policing is by consent. And it's also something that the police force has got rid of in terms of how they operate in communities. People don't know the police officers anymore. People don't trust the police officers. And community policing is where it's at. So if they're seeing the same faces over and over again, and they know them, the police know the local residents know the people that are policing them. Now, people aren't really particularly interested in what your status is. They don't care whether you come in a car that says Hertfordshire Constabulary on it, or you come in an unmarked car or a marked car that says whatever it is, ABC Security, so long as you're doing the job and you're performing the job. And the main job has got to be crime prevention. It's not detecting crime, it's preventing crime. And that is where the opportunities are. Because if you're preventing crime, you're keeping neighbourhoods safe, you're keeping people safe, you're keeping property safe, and you're acting responsibly. Well, people will gravitate towards that. Now, certain communities have got money to actually pay for that. And some haven't. But what I can see in the future is the police abandon more of their responsibilities as they're losing the trust of the public more and more and more. The community is going to be looking to become self-policing. And those communities are going to need people that know and understand the law as it's practiced today, as it's worked practically today. Now, the debate about statute law, common law, so on and so forth, we can go into that forever and a day. I would argue that neither are fit for purpose. But as things stand now, using the system, training people to use the system, not only are they going to be able to actually challenge the police, not only are they going to be able to bring successful criminal prosecutions followed by civil claims against the police. And, if you've got I don't know, so let's say you've got a shift of 12 officers, and all of those 12 officers are routinely performing illegal stop and search for whatever reason, whether it's to hit government targets, whether it's to individual targets, whatever the reasons are. When you suddenly see a couple of those lose their jobs and get criminal convictions, lose their pensions,
man. Yeah.
This is your modifier. Because, none of us like to be vulnerable. None of us like to be exposed. And suddenly, if that is the case, the people around them are going to say, well, hang on a sec, I'm not going to put, the force hasn't protected me on this one. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I've got a mortgage. I'm not going to lose my job by behaving in this way. So it's only while we're allowing them to continue behaving in this way. And this is why we've got the stop and search programme. And it's like anything else, Travis, it's very, very, very difficult to get out there. We've delivered some of it to some communities. It needs to be free of charge. The service needs to be free of charge. We need to be educating them. It's a whole day. It covers everything about stop and search. There's aid memoirs that can go on the back of phones and things like that. We cover everything from all of the law, what you do, what you don't do. What you let the police do and how you let them actually convict themselves. All about, your rights to film in public, what you do, what with that footage once you've got it, how you prepare your statements, and how you seek assistance to bring these criminal charges. And so what we want to do is get out there. We want to get out there into the vulnerable communities. So, whether that's in South Yorkshire or the Midlands or London, it doesn't matter, to the areas where we've got the highest ratio of illegal stop and searches. So we're not going to be doing it in Wimbledon, where hardly anyone's ever stopped and searched. You look at the figures and no one out there stopped and searched. Well, we wonder why that is. I would suggest that it's principally a mono-ethnic, quite wealthy area. Doesn't mean that they're not carrying cannabis, because you can guarantee they are. Because unfortunately, 3% of the country being black males, 3% of young black males between 14 and 24 are not consuming all of the cannabis. I would suggest that a great many of the 87 white young males are also doing exactly the same thing. In fact, I know that from my own experience, but we're not targeting them.
We shouldn't be targeting them at all, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but
at least for cannabis,
Well, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, it's
yes.
absolutely. I mean, that in itself is another story.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're not going to win that one. But what we can do, but we need to be out there in the communities. We need to be hosting these meetings free of charge. So we need sponsors. We need some companies to come along and say, yeah, we will sponsor this. Even if it's high profile people from the BAME community, companies that principally operate and are managed, owned, controlled by members of the BAME community, because this disparity in society has to stop. And it's all about fracturing society, isn't it? And the power, the collective power of people is huge.
Absolutely, yeah.
But when we haven't got that, when we've got certain communities, we've got to fear Muslims, we've got to do this, or we don't like Jews, we don't like this, we don't like the other, and people have, society is fractured. We don't pull together and we don't do things together. There's no united front. And the thing is, if we allow one specific group of people to be victimized in this way, in the end, there won't be any left to victimize. So they'll come on and victimize somebody else. It's this war of attrition that we've got.
Yeah, and you touched on an important point in how we can, as people, combat this, and it's the community aspect, working together and having that trust and looking out for everyone around you, and I guess Empower the People is a part of a grander movement that is seeking to actually do that. Bring people together, build community, build trust. Yeah, man.
Yeah, but it's very difficult to get off the ground. All of the, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
It wasn't built in a day, and we have to start somewhere. We need somebody to come along and say, okay, look, there's £30,000. Go and put this out in all of these places. If once I can do that, I've already been, because I deal with, and I've been on, for the better or worse, I've been on various television programs a number of times, and so many articles in the news now. I've got one of the main UK television companies. I've also got one of the main broadsheet newspapers that said, you do it, we'll come out, we'll cover it, we'll run stories on it. We want to see, the policeman that's teaching people to fight back against the police. They want to go into those communities and do that because it's good for their image as well. Let's not, pretend it isn't good for their image, because it is, because they need to be showing concern for these things happening in society, whether they're sincere or not. That's difficult to judge, but the fact that you're getting this level of exposure out there, and it will eventually hit a tipping point, because if we don't stop it, if we don't challenge it, we don't bring these prosecutions, and we don't stop what they're doing, they're just going to keep making it stronger and stronger and stronger. Let's slide that in the Public Order Act. So you're going to march now, you're getting yourself ready in Hyde Park or wherever it is to go off, and as you go out, the police stop and search you. No reasonable suspicion, no nothing.
So, an incredible precedent would be, should you be successful with these prosecutions that are happening, and I'm wondering, can you at least give us a date for any of that, or is that still too much information?
No, it's not. It's when you say, can I give you a date? The problem is A, getting it out there. We all want something done, and this sounds brutal. I speak to something's got to be done about it. Well, let's do something about it then.
Yeah,
This is
but because you mentioned that there was in the number of policemen that you've sort of had
Oh, I
dealings
don't
with.
know. I haven't even been given
Ah,
any court dates yet
right,
for
right.
that
Okay,
sort of
that's what
thing.
I meant. Yeah, sure.
Oh,
Okay, 'cause
sorry, I
that'll be
misunderstood.
one to watch, man, because that will be such a huge precedent, and I imagine social media in the truther movement would really pick up on that. That look, this guy's taking the police officer to court, he's getting all these charges, blah blah blah. That's pretty huge, man.
I mean, that will come. I mean, that's without doubt because, I'm still waiting for court dates and things like that. But yeah, we need to get this out there. We need to be able to get into the communities. We need to find a sponsor to do it. It's not cheap because all of the training materials, they all had to be written, then all the learning objectives identified, then all the bibliographies completed, and then it had to be sent off and certificated. Because, we don't do anything that's not certificated. We don't teach anybody something that is not definitively and empirically provably that is what the law says. This is what it is. We don't interpret anything. We don't put a spin on it, because if you do that, people start getting it wrong. But I want to get out there. I've got the right kind of people to do the training, i.e., a fat, bald, old age white guy is not possibly always the best front facing towards groups of marginalised ethnic minority people. Especially being ex-police, but I've got the trainers that are from that background, people that will go out into the community, and I've had a lot of community leaders interested in it. And then the minute I say to them, "Well, look, no one's making any money out of this, nobody. However, there are expenses to be covered. There's got to be a hall. The trainers have got to get there. This has got to be done." And it's all like, "Oh well, yeah, no, how much is it going to cost?" Well, I don't know, £200-300. Oh well, no, we don't know we can afford that. And this is something that frustrates me, Travis, because people say something's got to be done. And then a lot of the time, the minute you say, well, it's going to cost X, which isn't an extortionate amount of money, it might mean giving up a packet of cigarettes this week. Oh, well, let's not bother. And that's the kind of frustration that gets me.
There's something powerful in that metaphor, as you're saying that. It's like we gotta give up something to get something else. There's something to that. That really struck me. I like that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, I sold my house, split the profits between me and my wife. She wasn't very happy with what I was doing. And I took my money, and over from 2009 to date, I've spent over $500,000 of my own money doing stuff. And that's, to me, that's been the only way to do it. And we sort of look at everything. I mean, I'm working on a documentary on the moment on people trafficking. As we speak now, literally that phone call that came in was from one of the cameramen that is now in one of the seedier areas of Eastern Europe filming. And he's actually out there. I mean, he's got all the full, we've got like £200,000 worth of equipment, but he's actually in one of the very seedy areas in Romania using covert cameras filming now. And we've been looking at that, the 7.5 million people that are trafficked every year. The dynamic of girls between 13 and 18 being the most, with 90+% of them being forced into the sex industry. So I've got a whole team out at the moment in various locations in Europe working on that. We're going to be challenging the police on that. We're going to be challenging the National Crime Agency. We're going to be challenging the authorities very much on that for their total lack of action.
So that's huge. Yeah, man. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean that's all self-funded. And so these are the things that we're trying to get out there. Another documentary that we're making at the moment. And if there's anyone out there, and again, I don't want to offend anybody, but I've been working with a group of people that have left the organisation of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and these are people that have come out. They've disfellowshipped or come out and resigned effectively from the organisation, and this is for the huge amount of child abuse that's going on in that organisation. And these people now, they're talking. They want to tell their stories. We're gearing up to actually bring some prosecutions and report offenders from within that organisation to the police that have been identified by, 1, 2, 3, 4 victims so on and so forth. So if there's anyone that's listening in that has come out of that organisation, has got similar type of experiences, or knows of somebody, people that we can talk to, people that we can put in the right direction for pastoral care. We're not looking at just sensationalism. What we're looking here is a support network coming out of this, an NGO, so people can get medical assistance, they can get psychological assistance, they can get pastoral care, and we can aid them in reporting their abuses to the police, and oversee through the police and pressures on the police and crime commissioners that these prosecutions are taken ahead, because there is an awful lot of abuse of young females and young males within that organisation, and the information we're getting is just snowballing. But this is another area that we need to address, because unfortunately there is so much abuse going on of minors in religious organisations. So this is something else that we want to expose. We want to encourage prosecutions for that, because it is a priority to always to protect vulnerable people, and whether that be vulnerable minorities or vulnerable children, then to my mind that is the focus in life. That's a priority. So if you don't mind, anyone out there, they can contact you, contact me. Please, feel free to put my email up, Travis. I don't mind, but we'd be interested to hear anyone that maybe been a victim of this in that specific organisation. This will be quite a big expose.
Yeah, man. Well, it sounds like you're going into some of the darkest parts of reality and trying to shine some light in there, man. So that's really noble of you to be doing that, and I look forward to seeing these awesome documentaries that you're working on and everything else that's all happening here. Very excited to see where it all goes, man. So, well, thanks for joining me. You got any other quick words to say to the people whilst I got you here?
No, not really. I mean, the thing is, look after each other. Just let's look after each other. Let's value everybody for who they are and what they contribute. It doesn't matter. I know they teach diversity and things like that, but we're one people, and we're up against quite a struggle in so many different ways. And the only thing I would say to people is, look by anything that's minor, that's insignificant, that's a difference of opinion. And just value the strength of unity and collective action. And an interestingly thing, and these things happen by accident. I was reading a report yesterday or the day before, and it made me laugh so much, because the police now, not only are they not dealing with burglaries, not dealing with shoplifting, not dealing with theft of expensive pedal cycles and telephones and all of this sort of stuff, but they're now being told to caution people or not charge people at all, because the courts system is overflowed and they simply cannot cope. There's no court space to even hear trials. And this is what's happening. People talk to me about, I didn't pay my speeding, I didn't pay my ULEZ, and, I sent this letter off saying whatever it was. And the reality of this now is they will catch up in time, but at the moment, like a third of all ULEZ fines haven't been paid, and this is because the systems cannot cope with it. And so sometimes it's such their technology is not up to the job, and so passive resistance can work just as well, because if nobody paid the fine, they just can't. They cannot physically do it. And whatever your argument is for pollution and I don't know, environmental arguments and things like this, when you actually look at not just the ULEZ, but all of the different types of fines and charges that they can now put against you. I unfortunately had to drive into London today. And I'm a really calm bloke, I don't get upset by much. And I was saying to my passenger, look at all of these cameras. Didn't matter where I looked, every lamppost, there was some form of ANPR. These double lens things that are looking down into your car as well. Literally every single thing they can bolt a camera to, they have now. This started with ANPR. We've let it continue and continue and continue. So unity again.
Yeah, man. That's it, right? I think that's a brilliant way to wrap this up. Is this is how we do it. This is the answer, guys. Unity and non-compliance with bullshit, and that's how we get out of this. Well, thank you, Dave, for joining me. I've really enjoyed this show, and I'm sure
It was a
everyone
pleasure,
else
Travis.
going to find this really informative. And I'll see you around.
Yeah, mate. And look, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I can, really give them the skinny on stop and search and what we should be doing.
Yeah,
And of
I'll
course,
put your email in the description. Yeah.
yeah, and let the people online. The training's in there. The lawful observers trainer's in there. Just look at it. You don't have to study it like mad. Look at it, because you will pick up some areas that are doing some serious heavy lifting, which will teach you to protect yourself and not surrender your power.
That's it, guys.
Take care, my
Brilliant.
friend.
Power the people. See you, Dave. Cheers.
Bye.